Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 12, Delivering Your Speech. Previously, we've been discussing language, and where language is the verbal communication, the words that we say, delivering your speech is the nonverbal communication. That is everything else beyond the words. And there is a lot more meaning communicated through the nonverbal communication than the verbal. Also, nonverbal communication is believed more over the over the verbal. So, when we communicate verbally that I care a lot about this topic, that's one thing. If we communicate the opposite with our nonverbal communication, our delivery, then that diminishes the quality of our speech, and the nonverbal is believed, unfortunately, over the verbal. So, let's talk about delivering our speeches. There are 4 key ways that we deliver our speeches: through manuscripts, reading from a written script, memorizing, taking that written script and memorizing it, committing the information to memory, and then on where memorized is on this end of the spectrum, having to work really hard to get all the memorization correct. Impromptu is the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where we have very little preparation, but impromptu sometimes gets conflated as off the top of our head when that is not really the case. In fact, it is more structured and organized, and there is still a great deal of support, but it's done with very little preparation, and it is a skill that anyone can do when we learn the tools. And then where memorized is on this end of the spectrum and impromptu is on this end of the spectrum, extemporaneous is smack dab in the middle. It's where we refer to an outline, but we do not memorize every word that we are going to say. So we memorize in general the general ideas of the outline, but we do not memorize word for word. There are benefits to every single one of these. Manuscripts you don't have to read, but on the flip side, you're more likely to not have a connection with your audience because you're reading from a script. Memorized is the opposite end of the spectrum, although there are still challenges because memorized takes a whole lot of work. It's easy to mess up. And then also, while you do have a connection with your audience, and you are able to have a lot more control over your message, it can come off as canned, as too prepared to the point where it seems like it's not as authentic. Then we have impromptu. The big benefit, no practice. But the big issue with it is that we do not have as much control over our points. And because there is such little preparation, we cannot get high quality information. We won't have time to research. We won't have time to develop our points. And extemporaneous has all the benefits of impromptu and all the benefits of memorized or manuscript because you get good, solid researched information. You have well developed points and you have well developed support. And you still have that contact with the audience because you are not reading from a script or have it memorized so it sounds canned. Instead, you're coming up with the words as you go so that you are able to communicate your ideas in an authentic way. So, now let's move on to the types of delivery. Voice is a big part of your delivery. The general idea and the 2 things I want you to take away from this part. First, we want to be like Goldilocks. We don't want to be too high, too low, too loud, too quiet, too fast, or too slow. We want to be somewhere in the middle. But the second takeaway is that we also want to find areas to add variety. Think to your favorite YouTube personality or your favorite public speaker. What you will end up noticing is that they have great vocal variety throughout their entire speech because that is engaging, but they do not, but they stay within certain moderated, certain range, and then when they need to, they change their pitch, rate, volume. So let's talk about pitch, rate, and volume. Pitch is how high you speak, how low you speak. So you can speak high, you can speak low. Rate is how fast you speak or how slow you speak. So, for example, if you were telling a story that was getting very exciting, so we got through the Disneyland gates and we ran right past Goofy through Town Square and we took a left and went all the way knocking people over through Adventureland and then we got to Indiana Jones, our favorite ride, and then we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited. Because that's what happens at Disneyland. That's part of the fun. But you notice that there was a fast rate at one part, then a slow rate at another part as the story demanded. Also, as I had fast rate, I also increased the pitch. All of which playing together to create a tone. The last part of this is volume. We don't want to be too loud, but we also don't want to be too quiet. We should strive to be more loud than quiet, obviously, or else the audience cannot hear us. Some other things that can improve clarity non-verbally is making sure that you're pronouncing words correctly, putting the right emphasis on the right syllable, but also articulation. You have 3 articulators: the lips, the teeth, and the tip of the tongue. The lips, the teeth, and the tip of the tongue. And when we open our mouths, it allows for our articulators to work. And we do not usually work on these articulators often because usually we can get away with not opening our mouths very much. But the general principle behind articulation as well as vocal quality, the bigger the mouth, the more sound can come out. So we have to be sure that we're opening our mouths beyond where we think we should, because it's very easy to mumble and to get away with mumbling in interpersonal communication situations. Next, we want to avoid filled pauses. Things like like, so. As I have stated before, pauses are good for a public speaker because it builds tension and the next thing you say releases it. But since it is a tense situation, we fill it with or like or so. We want to be sure that we're avoiding that. Also, inflection, we want to put emphasis on certain words to obtain clarity in meaning. Notice that I inflected on certain and meaning, highlighting certain parts of my message. Now let's move on to body language. Body language can communicate a lot as well non-verbally. The appearance, we should approach the podium with confidence. Showing confidence is different than saying that I am confident. In a credibility statement, you can say I am confident in my material because I have done a lot of research or because I have experience with this situation. But it's one thing to say something, it is another thing to show that confidence. And in a channel discrepancy where the verbal and the nonverbal communication is not matching, I say that I'm confident, I don't show that I'm confident, the nonverbal communication wins out. So we want to be sure that we're approaching the podium with confidence. Our speech starts not when we start speaking, but when we are approaching the podium. So we want to be sure that we're making that good first impression. Also, the clothes that we wear is important. As we've stated before, we want to dress slightly better than the audience. And the clothes we wear can improve our credibility or diminish our credibility. Also, and so in general, first impressions affect ethos. Appearance is our first impression a lot of the time. Next, we move on to posture. Posture, we should not shift from foot to foot. So when we are standing, we should plant our feet and not move around very much. The online equivalent of this is swaying or slouching like this. We should be sitting up so that we are showing that we are engaged. Also, be sure to stand tall or sit up tall and keep your head up. Uh, Obviously, not to avoid the double chin, but also because it your vocal cords, your breath, all of that are your tools. And when you have your head up and your shoulders back, slightly back, it can allow you to have more of your physical capacity available to you than if we are slouching and we have our head down and we're not really opening our mouths very much. So keep your head up. We also want gestures. We want to be sure that they are controlled and deliberate so that there is some sort of purpose behind the gestures that we are using. They can also assist in pacing your speech. What you have something to keep in mind is that it can break up some of your idiosyncratic behavior because as you do gestures, it ends up pacing your speech, which is very interesting. We also have platform movement. This is when we actually move. So, as I've said before, you should be planting your feet. The big exception of this is when we are moving. But James, how can I plant my feet and move? You can't. You can plant your feet and then move because all platform movement should have some sort of purpose, should be consistent with the message and reducing barriers. You shouldn't be running into things or being in front of things. Also, it can help be purposeful by reinforcing verbal transitions. So, for example, for the next few minutes, I will talk about, sorry, I've just talked about the health benefits of apples. Now I'm talking about the health benefits of bananas. That I can move during that transition to reinforce that transition. We do not want to randomly pace around the room. A lot of times we see this in speeches where someone will pace around the room. And that can be a way to feel a little bit more confident. You start to reduce some of your anxiety, some of your nerves, but it also shows that you are nervous. Also, it's not purposeful, and it can be very distracting. Sometimes what online communication, the reasons why like TED Talks, for example, can get away with it is because while they are moving, the screen is not. But we should avoid doing that. Now we move on to the face and what we can do with the face to communicate confidence nonverbally. Eye contact. We want to be sure that we are giving eye contact to the audience. This is the only real way that we can create a connection with our audience. Eye contact can make you appear more believable, more trustworthy, and appear relaxed and prepared. You should be making eye contact with the audience before you even speak, because it's one thing to start a speech like, hello, my name is James Arroyo, and for the next few minutes I would like to talk to you about delivering your speech. Or, hi, my name is James Arroyo, and for the next few minutes. The first one is better because you are already connecting with the audience before you have even started speaking. Also, in an in-person setting, we should look at all parts of the room. Look over there, look over there, look over there, look over there. That is called scanning, where we communicate one idea to one person, and then another idea to another person, then another idea to another person, and another idea to another person. This reduces the awkwardness of just focusing on one person throughout the entire speech, but it also avoids a situation where we are not really making contact with the audience by just looking over their heads and not really focusing on any one person. And facial expressions, the general idea is that we want to make sure that it fits the topic and the mood. Not much else to speak on that. One thing to keep in mind with that, though, is that when we are smiling, what can end up happening is that we can reduce our articulators because we do not have as much access to the physical tool of our lips, one of our articulators. So, instead, we should strive to not smile with our lips, but instead show that we are happy. Maybe through the eyes, maybe through part of the lips, but the majority is still used as that tool. Now we move on to something that is very common in our situation right here, presenting online. Presenting a speech online still has those nonverbal communication components. So, we have to be able to adapt to it because this is a very special online environment. So we have to be sure that we know our technology. This means practicing with the technology. Because if we do not, we are going to have situations where audio goes out, or maybe a link doesn't form the way that we wanted it to, or maybe that internet dies and that you need a backup plan. This unfortunately has happened a few times, and this leads to the fact that we should always have a backup plan, but in general, we want to know our technology as well as some of the pitfalls that can potentially happen. So, controlling the visual environment. This means that nothing should be going on around you. In a job interview, for example, you wouldn't do an online job interview in a coffee shop where you are not able to control the things that are happening around you. This is an especially big challenge through remote learning simply because we are in our homes, and as a result, there could potentially be things happening. So it's a good idea to find an area where you will not be disturbed so that you will be able to set yourself up for success. Also, adapt your nonverbal communication. Notice that my nonverbal expression is still within this area instead of going all the way out where I might just be doing gestures over here because you can't really see them, or at least see them very well, but I try to keep them up around here so that I'm still communicating. You can still see my gestures, but so in other words, I'm adapting to this situation up here. Also, we want to be sure that we're managing a Q&A for the environment online using the tools available. There are many tools that we can use to improve the online environment for our presentations, and there are a great deal of tools. In fact, Zoom has a lot of emojis that can allow people to raise their hand while still being able to discuss and being able to moderate online Q&As in that sense. A bad example of this is sometimes those if anyone's ever done a family reunion on Zoom, it can be a little bit challenging because since there is no moderator for that discussion, it can very much devolve into chaos where some people are talking a lot and then other people are just sort of sitting, maybe watching YouTube on a different screen. We also want to rehearse for the online environment, and As I've said before, this is due to the special nature of this online environment because you could lose audio. You should be sure that you're practicing in the environment. As we've talked about before, practice only works if you are simulating the situation. So we want to simulate the situation and have backup plans. Just in the off chance that things go down, there are always backup plans. For example, one good backup plan is that if there is a challenge with internet, for example, using your phone, you still have Zoom. But what you can do is you can possibly send me your PowerPoint. I could go through the PowerPoint and you could present with your with your phone on Zoom. There are many backup plans. There are always backup plans. So please be sure that you contact me if there are any issues with online communication on your presentation days. But in total, we can always have backup plans and always practice for those backup plans. So, when practicing, how do we do it? We should go through it aloud. As I've said before, effective practice is simulating the environment as much as possible. And reading the outline aloud also makes it so that you're not only simulating the environment, but you're also getting your mouth around the words, which can be very useful, building some of that muscle memory. Also, prepare your presentation outline so that, again, keywords or small phrases so that you're able to create the mental connections from your small keyword or small phrase to the point that you're trying to make. We also practice aloud several times using that speaking outline. Then you polish and refine the delivery of that outline. And then dress rehearsals, simulating the conditions as close as possible. Asking friends to watch your Zoom presentation is not that big of a deal. And your friends may be happy to watch and to observe and to see if there's any issues that can easily be overcome. So, with that, that concludes Chapter 12. Have a lovely rest of your day. I will see you next time.